Hello, thank you for visiting my channel. Today I'm doing something a little bit different than I normally do. I have a video that I'm going to be doing a glue book page in a travel journal. I actually filmed it a few weeks ago with no talking. And then I asked my subscribers whether they like the talking or not. And everybody said they prefer the talking. So I'm doing a voiceover, but I'm not going to talk about what I'm doing in the video, because there's something else that I want to just explore a little bit, and that is the topic of loneliness and isolation. We've all gone through COVID and it's still rearing its ugly head. And so there's been a lot of fallout from that whole couple of years experience that touched everybody in the world. And I think loneliness and isolation are two of the results that we've ended up with. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Let's get started. Have you ever noticed that when you're tired, everything looks worse? I feel like that today. And so I was thinking about loneliness and sadness and isolation. I went to visit a friend today who is at home. She's unwell and she's under treatment, and she's not supposed to go out and be around the public, which is a good thing because COVID has reared its ugly head yet again, and she needs to be isolated from that. However, she did say that she feels really isolated, and she said it's different from when everybody in the world was isolated because of COVID, even though that had a huge effect on everybody's emotional health. Just being the only one, I guess, is kind of worse. But I wanted to talk a little bit about isolation and loneliness, partly because as a result of COVID, it has become a bigger problem. But I don't think it has ever not been a problem. And I once heard someone say that sadness is an emotion, but loneliness is a spirit. And it puts a whole different complexion on both of those emotions. Isolation is a physical state mostly. If you're isolated, that means you're cut off from others and from things going on in your community or in your life, whatever. But sadness is an emotion, and it can be dealt with, or it gradually goes away. When my parents passed away, I felt very sad for quite a long time, and still feel quite sad about that. However, prior to COVID, I worked at home alone 5 days a week for 20 years and was never lonely. And when COVID came in, I thought, well, this is no big deal. My husband kept going to work because he was in one of those necessary industries, but I was at home and was fine with that. And I thought, this is no big deal because I'm used to it. However, I did find after a while, because there were no other social outlets besides online, that I started to feel really isolated. I never did feel lonely though. Now, another quick story. I was talking to another good friend of mine who said her husband passed away a couple of years ago, and she missed him terribly, which is totally understandable. But she found herself feeling so lonely. And I mentioned that idea that loneliness is a spirit. Now, what I'm talking about when I say a spirit, I'm talking about what Jesus talked about with spirits, which is there are evil spirits. It's not pretend, and it's not something that you can go, well, that's just an emotion or that's just a thought. There is a spirit world, and some of those spirits are not on your side, and they're not from God. If it's positive, it's from God. If it's not, it's from Satan. And the great thing about knowing that is that you can refuse to be affected, but you have to know how. That could be a conversation for another time. However, there are things that you can do about loneliness. I would say just refuse to be lonely. It's kind of like when I was younger, I used to be afraid of deep water. I had sinus problems and I took swimming lessons, and it was painful. When the water got in my nose and face, it was painful. And so I was like 5 when this whole keep away from deep water fear came in. And then one day, several decades later, I decided, completely independent of this, not to let fear be a motivator in my life. So what I did was, anytime a fear came along, I just spoke to it and said, no, I am not. I am not affected by fear. So you, being or whatever, cannot have any place in me. And I just practiced that so that it became a habit. And I would say, no, you can't. Fear is not a motivator in my life. So much so that after a while, I didn't have to do it because it just kind of gave up and went away, I guess. But a strange thing happened. Well, I don't know how strange, but an interesting thing happened after a period of time. And that was, a friend asked me to go sailing on his sailboat in the lake. And I live near a very large lake that is very deep. And I thought, great, I've never sailed before. I'd like to try that. So I went out sailing with him, and off we went. And I realized as we were, zooming around the lake, top speed with the sails up and everything, that I had no fear of deep water anymore. There was just nothing there. So I say this as kind of a lesson on how to change those things that keep coming back. And there's something more to this, and I don't want to go into too much detail because this isn't a very long video, but Jesus said that Satan could do nothing to him because he had nothing in him. So it's worth thinking about any areas of your life where there might be some wound or some experience that has left a negative thought or emotional pain or anything like that. That's kind of an opening, let's just say. If you heal those, then there's no opening. So you might want to consider that. Anyway, I realize this is kind of a deep topic, and there's a lot that can be said. However, with regard to hopefully offering at least a small solution to isolation, that is, open yourself up to other people, go out where people are, and not just like on the street or in stores and restaurants and things like that, but join things where you can actually get to know people and people can get to know you, because we all want to be known. And that goes a long way for getting rid of a sense of isolation, because you connect. It's not enough just to be where people are, because you can be alone in a crowd, but you need to be able to talk to other people. And social media and the internet has actually decreased those kind of opportunities. So you have to work a little harder to get them. And that will also go a long way towards solving loneliness. Have a look at a couple of these other videos and subscribe to my channel and click the little bell so you get the notifications when I have new videos, which come out now twice a week. And I'll see you next time.